Cash Money Records is one of the most successful labels in the history of music. And if you ask most people about Cash Money, they're going to think of Nicki Minaj, Drake, Lil Wayne, maybe Tiger. But what most people don't know is that Cash Money has a rich, deep history. And they have a lot of unknown artists for the most part who laid the foundation for the label all the way back in the early 90s. So I want to tell their story because growing up, that label meant a lot to me. You know, they played a big influence on my life as a 13, 14-year-old, seeing the hot boys run around. But as I dug deeper into the history of the label, it's just very interesting and very mysterious. A lot of allegations, a lot of conspiracies. So let's get to it. Albert Yellow Boy Thomas was a member of the hip-hop group UNLV, also known as Uptown Niggas Living Violent. Now, they were signed to Cash Money in the early 90s and released a couple of albums, but they probably best known for their beef with Mystical. They had a lot of back and forth pretty much for years, with some of the most notable tracks being Drag 'Em in the River by UNLV and Here I Go by Mystical. Now, allegedly, this just stayed on wax. It never poured into the streets, but that all would change in 1997 when Mystical's sister was murdered. Now, Mystical made a song called Murderers where he takes direct aim at Yellow Boy, kind of saying that, yo, you responsible for what happened to my sister. And it's also alleged that Baby is the one that paid for that hit. And it's also said that Baby would often mention this in his songs back in those days. Now, this is all alleged. But unfortunately, on April 5th, 1997, Yellow Boy was shot in the head in a Central City neighborhood in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, there are three conspiracies around this murder. One, that it was just simply a drug deal that went wrong. Two, Mystical had him murdered as retaliation for him allegedly killing his sister. And three, that Birdman Baby Williams had Yellow Boy murdered in retaliation for Yellow Boy allegedly pistol whipping Birdman and shooting up his truck for unpaid royalties. Now, we all know Birdman, and one thing I know about him, he don't pay nobody. I mean, this guy got sued by his cleaners for his mansion. He don't pay nothing, but this is all alleged. And Yellow Boy, he was only 22 years old when he was murdered, and the murder was never solved. It's a very unfortunate situation. Rest in peace, King. Next up, we got Edgar Pimp Daddy Gibbons, a New Orleans music legend and one of the pioneers of bounce music. Now, if you know anything about New Orleans, you know bounce music is king down there, and he was heralded as like a hometown hero. Matter of fact, Lil Wayne, his first rap name was not Lil Wayne. His first rap name was Shrimp Daddy, and it was just a play on words because he looked up to Pimp Daddy so much he wanted to kind of like name himself after him, you know. And Pimp Daddy was one of the first artists signed to Cash Money, and he actually did have like regional hits called Gotta Be Real, and he did release an album called Still Pimpin' in 1994. But unfortunately, Pimp Daddy was killed in the Florida projects on April 18th, 1994 in New Orleans, Louisiana. And what's even crazier is like he was 18 years old when he got murdered. And it seems that he was murdered over a lover's quarrel gone wrong. He was dating another Cash Money artist by the name of Miss T when he got in a fight with her brother, and after the fight, the brothers pulled out a gun and shot him in his face, killed him right there. So, like I said, man, it's a very sad, very unfortunate situation, and he was only 18 years old when he was murdered. Rest in peace, King. Now, let's get into the first lady of Cash Money Records, Renata Magnolia Shorty Low. Now, a lot of people probably don't know who she is, but she collaborated a lot with Cash Money in like the mid 90s and the early 2000s. And if you never heard her rap, make sure you go check out some of her music, because she got a song with the Hot Boys called Blood Thicker. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. But anyways, Magnolia Shorty was well known in New Orleans, and she was like one of the queens of bounce music down there. And actually Lil Wayne would reference her as his big sister. And even after her departure from Cash Money, Magnolia Shorty, she stayed busy. She stayed working, stayed making music, dropping albums, doing concerts and festivals. So, you know, after she rode that Cash Money wave, she was still doing her thing. Matter of fact, on December 20th, 2010, she was headed to Miami to do like a bounce music festival. But unfortunately, Magnolia Shorty wouldn't make it to that concert. That day she was riding in a car with a man by the name of Jerome Man Hampton. And he had been feuding with guys that were in a gang by the name of 3NG. And on this particular day, they just got the drop on him in the worst way. Because as Magnolia Shorty was driving her vehicle to leave her apartment complex to hit the airport, these guys blocked her in. And two men hopped out on each side of her vehicle. And another man hopped out and got on top of the vehicle. All three men were shooting inside of that vehicle, one through the sunroof and then the other two on both sides of the vehicle. It was over 50 bullets. 26 of those bullets hit Magnolia Shorty. Jerome Man Hampton, he also perished in the attack as well. Now, there is some silver lining in this, because all four men were apprehended and all four men are in custody and serving life in prison. McCoy Ratty Walker, Terrius T-Red Oni, Gregory Rabbert Stewart, Rico Freaky Jackson. I mean, these guys, they done went down. So that made me feel a lot better, because I was a huge fan of her music, and it's sad how she went out. She was only 28 years old when she got murdered. Rest in peace, Queen. Now, let's talk about the first ever artist signed to Cash Money Records, Robert Kilo G. Johnson Jr., who would release his first album, his debut album, in 1995, and it's called Blood City. Now, this artist was actually another influence of Lil Wayne that he has talked about in interviews of how that person influenced him. But unfortunately, on January 15, 1997, Kilo G was murdered at the Live Oaks apartment complex in New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, the circumstances around his murder are still just unclear, because his girlfriend at the time was interviewed and said that she woke up when she heard multiple gunshots, and when she ran to the door, it was wide open, and she looked down and seen him holding his chest, asking for somebody to help him. But he also told her to go back in the house because he was afraid whoever shot him might kill her. And a cousin of his was also interviewed and said that somebody knocked on the door, asked for Kilo G, and when Kilo G came to the door, 3 shots rang out. And next thing you know, Kilo G was dead. But it get even crazier, because he didn't die right away after he was shot. When the police were called, he was still breathing, blood coming out of his mouth and whatnot, but still breathing. And for some reason, in the reports, it says that the detectives went up to him and kneeled down and asked him as he's bleeding out, "Who shot you?" As if this man would be able to answer that. I'm sorry, but that was just so crazy to me. They also noted how it was like blood stains on his blue Cadillac, and I'm assuming that just came from after he got shot, trying to just find something to hold him up and keep him upright so he don't lay down and die. But it happened anyways, and he was only 20 years old when he died. Rest in peace, King. And last but definitely not least, Derek Leon Williams, aka the number 2 stunner, aka Bulletproof. Now, he is the nephew of Birdman, so he was down with Cash Money for a long time, and he's actually on a lot of their music from about the mid-90s all the way up until about 2000. And then see, he was also a part of a group called the Bee Gees that consisted of him, Lil Wayne, and BG. Now, we all know BG would go on to make that name his own, but initially it was a group, BG standing for Baby Gangsters. Now, even as Cash Money ascended and became one of the top hip-hop labels in the game, Lil Derek, he was just heavy in the streets. So I don't think you really ever seen him with Cash Money like that, and I don't think he latched on with them like that after their mainstream success, because he didn't want to leave the hood. Like I said, he was heavy in the streets doing his thing, and on top of that, coming up with Cash Money, he got to a point as a man where he wanted to do his own thing. So that's when he started his Undisputed record label. But unfortunately, in October of 2002, Lil Derek would be shot to death. Now, it's hard to find a lot of information on him. I couldn't even find the date of death. I just know that the month was October and the year was 2002. His age, I know a lot of the music he was doing with Cash Money in the 90s, he was in his teens. So October of 2002, that would still put him in his early 20s. Still definitely way too young to die. But one thing I did find out was, allegedly when he was murdered, he still had a half a brick on him. So being heavy in the streets, he was doing that to the very end, but he was still too young to die. Rest in peace, King.